tonight we are talking about episode 608, the finale. I can't believe it. I am not alone. It's written by Luke Skelhaus. I mean, wow. And it's directed by Jamie Payne. I'm Courtney Williams. I am the producer of Outlander behind the scenes, and I'm a book fan and a show fan, and I do lots of stuff, including this discussion with my favorite gals. And yeah, can't wait to talk about 608.
I'm Carmen Schmidt, and I write the Outlander Anatomy blog, and I love Outlander, both the book and the show. And I use examples from there, both of those, to teach anatomy lessons, and I enjoy it very much. And I'm also anxious to talk about 608.
And I forgot to say what I'm drinking.
Oh.
Antoinette, you missed my fancy glass last week.
Oh, nice.
It's electrolytes in a fancy glass. I won't go into the rest of it, but and I have water and I'll have tea. I am hydrating tonight.
And I am drinking my German sparkling wine. And you'll notice that I don't use a stem glass because every time I do, I knock it over. So I use a stemless glass out of safety.
Very smart and practical.
I'm Antoinette. Unfortunately, I don't write anything, unlike my esteemed colleagues, except crazy posts on Twitter. I'm a show fan, and I came to the books after I discovered the show. And so I very much appreciate the show because I'm an avid TV watcher. I've watched a lot of TV over a lot of years. And I think I know quality TV when I see it. And so that is what attracted me to the show. And then I discovered the books, and it's no going back since. And what I love about Outlander is that it has led me to this community of fans and to these three ladies who have become an integral part of my life. And I'm drinking water. Because, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Dr. Toomer flipped you off.
Well, she flipped you off when you had water a couple weeks ago, so she gets it now.
Carmen, you want to get in on it? It's the finale.
I am Kathy Harmon, and I am a family physician who loves Outlander, both the books and the show. I like them separately. I'm not a book purist by any stretch of the imagination, especially now since I read them many years ago and I can't remember most of it anyway. So, so I can't remember what's in the books and what isn't, but I just generally know that I love them both. And I am a contributor to Blacklanders Convos, and I am also learning to really enjoy the science and the medicine within Outlander. I normally turn my medical brain off when watching, and Carmen and my beautiful sisters here have helped me open up and actually start enjoying other shows even more because I start noticing things that I hadn't noticed before. And I am drinking, and also, as everyone knows, I am the wall purist. Now that I am. I may not be a book purist, but I am a wall purist. Anyway, I'm drinking elderberry tea today.
Wow, I'm the only one.
Well, I normally would have, but I'm so sleepy, I would have been snoring by the end of the, the discussion. So, yeah, Antoinette's flipping me off now.
Yeah,
but I'm drinking tea in my fancy mug, my bee mug that has honeycombs on the inside and bees on the outside.
Oh,
sweet.
All right, that's cute. Okay,
That is
I
cute.
forgive you. That's cute.
I thought this episode was fantastic. This was not my favorite part of the book. when I do a little piece is like, what are we going to see in season 6? And I left this whole part out because I was like, I don't want to see that. But this episode was so well done. It was so balanced that I really enjoyed it. This may be my favorite episode of the season.
I loved it. I loved this episode. And I have to say that Luke is coming into his own. When the first time we saw one of his, I don't remember what it was, but we weren't totally on board. But boy, has he ever shown, I think, in this episode. And I was very impressed with the writing. I was thrilled with the action. And it was very well choreographed, I felt. And the music was off the charts. And I thought the photography also was compelling.
Where was I? Oh, the episode. Shit. Oh, this episode was fantastic. It was so well done on so many levels that I am prepared to overlook the parts that I did not like. Because there were parts that I didn't like. And I just, oh. But the parts, overall, it was a fantastic finale. It put a cap on what has been a fantastic season for writing, for character development, for adaptation. I just flat out loved it.
My impression, I was very pleasantly surprised. At the end of last episode, and when they showed a little bit of the preview for this episode, I didn't think I was going to like it that much. I thought it was going to be one of those really tedious conflict shows where you're just kind of watching things go back and forth and like, okay, enough already. But it did not do that at all. There were some parts that I felt a bit disjointed, but it was clear that they needed some things to break up the tension of some of what was going on in this episode. And I thought at first I was like getting annoyed and I was just feeling kind of antsy watching it. And then I thought it was the episode. How I was feeling about the episode. And then I realized it was the content. It was just pulling out the emotion that you're supposed to be feeling, watching what we were watching. It was very compelling, very well done. And there were a few things in there that we haven't really seen at all in this whole season. So I thought it was pretty interesting. They decided to throw it in at us at the last episode. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, let's talk about that. All right. So Carmen, can you kick us off with one of your favorite scenes?
Yes, I love the Jamie and Claire lovemaking scene. I thought it was extremely engrossing. I thought it was tender and gentle with a intensity, a restrained intensity that I could imagine would be appropriate under the circumstances and that they would feel with the pressure of what's going to happen to them the next day, and with all those people outside wanting to hang them, basically. I love them showing their hands on the back of her, on Jamie's back, and him on Claire's back. The tenderness of that and the seeking of each other, where you embrace each other in that way. I think it was just wonderful, and I could feel it building toward a climax.
No pun intended.
None at all.
Definitely intended.
Or pun intended, maybe.
I had so many favorite scenes, but the one is the scene where the dinner, the Last Supper scene, where Claire and Jamie were talking, and she had her head on his thigh, and they were talking about his 9 lives and the last meal and so on and so forth. I mean, the alchemy that is Sam and Katrina with a well-written script is just unparalleled. They light up the screen, they fill the screen, but it is not overblown. It is not, that scene for me was just perfect in every way. So that was my favorite scene. I mean, the lovemaking scene was right up there, but that was my favorite.
I just wanted to
Good.
say a couple things about Carmen's favorite, which was my favorite too, that lovemaking scene. I think that's the best lovemaking scene I've seen in Outlander. Possibly. The pace, it was lovely. It was sublime. It was, I felt they communicated their divine union in that love scene. It really came across. The choreography of it didn't feel like choreography. It felt like, yes, she would touch his face and he would touch her face to remember if they're about to die, their faces. And then just how I've been trying to figure out how to say this without sounding crude, but ever since, so in seasons 1 and 2, they used their tongues in love scenes. And it's kind of like when Catherine will say, like, that's not what would happen in real life. When I watch the love scenes from season 3, 4, 5, their bodies are making love, but their kisses are very chaste. Their mouths. And this scene was different, and they didn't use their tongues, because I know that that's the preference and that's great. But they actually opened their mouths. Their faces were part of the whole scene. I don't know if it's the intimacy coordinator, or I think Jamie Payne is a genius. So I'm sure it's partly that, but that was a beautiful, beautiful scene. And I loved also how they set it up where she's facing away, just like she had been when she sees Lionel. You know, we've seen her like that in other episodes, but instead in this one, she turns to Jamie and she says, "I'm so afraid." And then, you know, they come together, and that's the vulnerable Claire that we have not gotten to see, that culminated in this beautiful love scene. And I loved how they panned out at the end, while they're still making love. I don't need to see climaxes. I mean, I realized I don't in this episode. Just beautiful.
There were scenes and there were moments that I really, really liked, but they're too small, I guess, to kind of give them as the number one. However,
No rules like that exist.
well, honestly, my favorite scene was when when Tom Christie touched Claire's hand when she was in jail. And he said, I thought that was like the most tender moment in the show. And the other was when Jamie was watching her, and the pain on his face. And he realized, he was like, and at that moment, how he realized, oh gosh, he's in love with my wife. That was actually, because there were no words. Nothing was spoken. Nothing was spoken. And you're going to find this very shocking, but it was with Brie and Roger. And mainly because.
Which scene with Brie and Roger?
When their lovemaking scene.
Oh.
Not, and the reason it was because I saw Jamie and Claire's coming. I knew as soon as she rolled over it was going to happen. I did not see it coming with, no pun intended, with with Roger and Brie. And what I liked about it, it was actually my favorite and least favorite. It was awkward, which is, it's like it wasn't coordinated. It didn't seem coordinated. You couldn't see the only part of it that seemed kind of coordinated when both of his hands were covering her breast. It was clear that that was the purpose of his hand placement. Other than that, it was just that same thing where you're stumbling and fumbling, trying to get your clothes off. It's not this smooth and gentle. Like, it's always like a bit awkward, and that seemed very realistic to me. And so I liked that. I just thought it was you know, but it was it just seemed real. It was just very real.
I actually got a hoot out of the final scene where Ian arrives with Chief Bird, who sings in the morning, and his warriors, and free Jamie. I just thought, what a feel good ending. I love that whole scene. And I thought, what was his name? The guy who got his Oaks. Yeah, Oaks. He got his all right, and he deserved it. He was really a crumb, and you know, lording it over his prisoners in an indecent way. So I really got a kick out of that, and I love Ian. He's so flamboyant, you know. He pulls back that arrow, and then he reaches for another one, and then knocks at it. I just thought it was great. I loved it.
One of my other favorite scenes was at the beginning of the shootout when Claire and Jamie, you know, they had the guns all lined up, and he was shooting, and she was reloading and handing it off to him and everything. I just thought, oh God, how Bonnie and Clyde, I love it.
Exactly.
They were just such badasses. Oh
Yep.
my God, I love it. I loved it. I loved that entire sequence. I was just saying, shoot the bastards dead. Kill them all. That's what I kept saying throughout that whole scene. Loved it. I loved it.
All right. Well, Carmen, you're reading my notes tonight, because my second favorite was when
Sorry.
Ian. I had the same feeling. It was like in the old days where in the movie theater where the hero comes and everyone cheers. It was that great. And young Ian, when they come up, the camera angle from below, and he's got his, you know, his whatever it's called, bow and arrow. I just thought that was such a great scene.
Yep.
Loved it. So my third favorite is them riding away on the horses at the end. I loved all the horses in this. And I loved particularly that they were detailed enough to grab Jamie's horse. They came riding in with it with no rider, and it was saddled up for him. It was John Quincy Myers, or John Quincy Myers double. And then when they rode away, it was Jamie in the lead. And, you know, they're on the beach, and there was one horse that was really trying to like go, and the rider was having to hold him back. But, you know, they didn't do anything weird where it was like, well, this is Ian's scene, so he gets to be in the front. It was just like, we're going to get Claire, so of course Jamie's in the front. And I don't know, I loved it. I loved that. It was beautiful. Yeah.
For honestly, every scene that Mark Lewis Jones was in, to me, he made that episode. I just felt like he just gave a weightiness or gravitas, as if you will, to every scene he was in. And we're used to seeing Jamie and Claire, or Sam and Katrina, being the continuity through the scenes. And except for the times when they cut away to Brie and Roger, it was him. And it was like he was the elder statesman. He finally had that respectable and weightiness, and the heaviness, and the there were a few times when he lost it, and they were trying to remove that control from him. But for the most part, I just felt like every scene he was in, he carried it. And it was just so well done. And I was waiting to see what he was going to do next. I wasn't waiting to see what Claire was going to do next, or Jamie. I was waiting to see what was Tom going to do next.
It was a nice also kind of completion, because he was 601 was all him. And then he had a big part in this episode too.
I thought that the whole choreography of Jamie and Claire setting things up in the house for battle was thrilling, honestly. And they worked like a team. They barely even had to say anything. I mean, he said the table and she knew exactly what he meant and they went after it. And you know that she got the guns and she got them out as Antoinette said, and she started loading them and priming them for Jamie. And I just thought it was really well choreographed and they were just bing, 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 bing. It was really moved. It was exciting to watch for me. And I enjoyed it very much. And I was thrilled too during it. I was, you know, well, the first time I saw it, I was just like, it really had me on the edge of my seat. I loved it.
When Hiram Crombie and the Fisher folk came up and that damn colonial Karen.
The damn what?
Colonial Karen.
Oh.
Miss McGregor.
Mrs.
Yeah.
McGregor. Oh my God. She's the witch, you know.
Yeah,
You know,
she is.
You know, when they say somebody protests too much, she always is talking witch. So I think she might be practicing the dark arts. Why she always wants to accuse Claire of being a witch.
Yeah.
But I love that, you know, I love that scene because it made it more believable when Jamie said and was trying to explain to Claire that nobody's coming if they haven't come already. Because the Fisher folk came as a group led by Hiram Crombie, not in defense of Claire and Jamie, but to join in the condemnation. And I thought that scene was expertly done and it explained a lot of the dynamic on the ridge and why Jamie was so stoic in his approach to the fact that, listen, we might be on our own with this. And so I love that scene. I love Hiram Crombie in that scene was great. And then when Tom burst out, listen to me, the juxtaposition of Tom Christie and Richard Brown, two axes of evil, but evil in a different way. You understand what I'm saying? It was just genius. And both of those men are powerhouse actors, and both of them delivered in that scene. My God, what's his name? Richard, what's Larkin?
Christopher Larkin.
Chris Larkin.
He is, oh my God, the casting on the show continues to be mind-blowingly good. So
Yeah.
that whole Fisher folk scene was one of my favorites as well.
That was on my list also. I thought everyone in that scene was fantastic.
Yeah.
The relief on Hiram Crombie's face when Tom, after Jamie said basically, you're going to hell if you give us this guy, you know, and then Tom came and he's like, thank God.
Oh God, thank God.
But yeah, Therese Bradley is
Therese, yeah.
Yeah. And she is good, man. She's commanding. Like,
yes,
when she speaks, you're like, she has a very strong voice too. It's like, if she called me a witch, I'd say maybe. I don't know. My other one is my next one was the standoff scene also, but in particular, the moment where Jamie is holding the gun and he says, if I wanted you dead, man, you'd be cooling this minute. That
was one of my favorite lines.
That was the best Jamie moment of this episode. And to me, it called back to episode 109, The Reckoning, when he's in the window.
Mm-hmm.
The moment that we're left on before the break between season 1, part 1 and part 2, when he says, I'll thank you to take your hands off my wife. It felt like that type of scene, like Jamie's such a badass. And then he just toyed with him, shooting his hat, shooting in front of him. You know, it just was pure Jamie.
Yeah.
And I loved how, yeah, they were working as a team. I thought Bonnie and Clyde too. And how he would just shoot and give Claire the gun, and she'd, you know, I loved how they, you know, they had them stay in character and work as a team. And of
Mhm.
course, Jamie's going to be the lead in that type of situation. It's battle.
Mhm.
And but yet it wasn't like Claire was made in some meek whatever, you know, she also is resourceful and resilient and intelligent, and they both are, and they just both worked as a team. And it was, I think, you know, I don't tend to like that action stuff. And
I do.
yeah, same, Carmen. I was riveted. I loved it. And I think it's because they stayed in character. It wasn't, you know, that their characters were sacrificed for like big explosions or some drama or something. It just,
Exactly.
they were able to do it all.
They took his balls out of the jar.
Say again.
They put his balls in a jar last season and they finally took them out.
Yeah. Oh no, he's got full balls this season.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
hairy
she
ones.
has her
Big.
balls too.
Big brass ones.
Yeah. We
Oh,
can talk
yeah,
more about that.
Your
Do you have-
description was better than mine.
Okay, let's go on to what worked for you, Carmen.
I want to say that I love the idea of the Priesthole in that house. Who knew that the big house had a Priesthole in it, or the equivalent of, but it makes sense because Jamie grew up with one at Lollybrook. So
Mhm.
he would know about one, and then he goes down there, and my God, there's an arsenal. It reminded me of Arnold Schwarzenegger, or
In the
something like
Terminator.
that. Yeah, pulling open that thing, and there's this whole line of guns, and you can. The first thing I thought was, oh, some of those. That's why there was only 20 rifles for the Cherokee.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Well, he's
I love that.
It's smart Jamie. Of course he's gonna do that, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean, it made perfect sense, but I was just surprised, delightfully surprised by it. I was unprepared. I didn't think, you know, when Claire goes to the closet and opens it there on the ground floor, okay, that's no big surprise. There's some weapons there, and I wasn't surprised. But then Jamie pulls back the rug and lifts up the floor, and down here's this whole thing. I loved it. I thought it was fabulous.
What worked for me? I loved the adaptation, because as book readers, we knew the progression of the story. And I was wondering, since they were doing this, how they were going to do it. And I loved how the essential elements of that entire confrontation from the books was realized in the show. And they did it without sacrificing the main core characteristics of how Jamie and Claire behaved in that situation. So the writing and the direction worked big time for me, because they took a scene or a series of scenes from the book, which I thought would have been difficult to realize properly on screen, and they just pulled it the hell off. And I love the adaptation. I love the bringing in of the Cherokee to come to Jamie's rescue, because that's a deviation from the books, obviously. And I loved that. I loved the writing and the direction. This Luke whatever his name is, Skelhas, forgive me if I'm butchering your name, sir. But the writing was exemplary. Exemplary. And when you start with that foundation, and then you combine it with a good director, and then you have a foursome of powerful actors in Chris Larkin, Mark Lewis Jones, Sam and Katrina. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, that worked. Worked. So I have to give that, what, 3 snaps, uh,
3 snaps in
4
a circle.
snaps, and a circle.
I'm going to say I have a lot of things that worked for me in this episode, but I'm going to talk about the horses. I cannot imagine how hard it was to, like Antoinette said, express so beautifully, to adapt and bring this part of the book to us the way they did. And specifically, what I'll talk about is the horses. That's a lot of horses on screen in a lot of scenes. And horses are prey animals, so they do a lot of reacting. They, you know, they're better than cats probably, but you know, they're still hard to work with. And what really worked for me was, because I pay attention to that stuff, was the horse scenes, and the way that they edited them, so that, for example, if there was a stunt rider, how they would make a little transition, like when Richard Brown rode down the hill, like at a canter down a steep hill, that's not easy to do on a horse. So that was definitely not him. But they show him going by a tree, and then when he comes out, you know, and he gets off the horse, it was just seamless, and it was well done. And there was another time when poor Ezra dies and falls off his horse, when I had to chuckle because his horse was like, but that's a horse for you. But anyway, Chris Larkin actually does the riding away from that scene back to the front of the line. And at first I was like, wow, look at that. The stunt rider holds his mouth like Chris Larkin does. And then I looked back and it was actually him. And he did a pretty good job on that ride. You know, and I just saw a lot of, you know, when they did the gunshot, I think I mentioned last season, you know, there was when they had the showdown in Brownsville and they shot the guns and the horses are all like, you know, if you shoot a gun near a horse, it's going to react. And so this time when Tom Christie shot the gun during the stoning scene, his horse didn't react right away because he probably had a gun that just didn't do anything. But they cut to a scene where the horses all were going nuts. And I was like, okay. Anyway, I just really appreciated the attention. And like I said, the fact that they got Jamie's horse and they rode with you know, ponying a horse where you're galloping into a sandy situation. I mean, that's all difficult stuff. And I really appreciated all of the work that went into the equestrian part of this episode. That really worked for me.
What worked for me was the pace. I thought it could have easily felt, certain parts could have easily felt very drawn out, and other parts could have felt very rushed, and none of it did. The pace seemed natural, and that's what I liked. Nothing, no conversation was rushed through or awkward, or, you know, when each scene that something happened, it didn't seem to happen too soon or too late. I just liked the pace quite a bit. And that's what I noticed most, because I was really, really tired when I was watching. And if it had gotten even slow just a little bit, I probably would have fallen asleep. And it didn't. And instead did the opposite. I was sitting there doing this the whole time. So I probably noticed the pace more this time than usual. The other thing that worked for me was the music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it's just it's gotten to the point now where the music is becoming like another character, but like almost like a non-speaking role. You don't notice they're there until but their facial expressions or something sort of affects the whole scene. And sometimes like I'll be sitting and it's like no one's talking, no one's really doing anything. And it's like I can feel my heart rate going up, and I'm like, why? Oh, the music. You know, and it's like it's really well integrated into the show to enhance what's happening, but not overtake what's happening. And that's what I like quite a bit. Probably more so this season than any other.
I love the way that, we heard Claire and Jamie's theme, but it started with a melody that wasn't quite it. And then it morphed into their theme as they were making love. Bear modified it in order to bring forth the refrains that we're so familiar with. There's a few points I'd like to make about the scene when Jamie and Claire are in the house that made an impression on me. One of them is when Claire is picking up the shards of glass from her broken window and looking at them, and then she picks up a ball that has obviously struck the wall somewhere and landed on furniture, and it was beautifully paced. There was no preaching, but it was very clear that her heart was breaking when she looked at her beautiful home and all the destruction that it had faced. And they were just relentless in their bombardment. I'm surprised they didn't have a cannon with them, honestly. And then they were firing together, to make it seem as though they had a Gatling gun type thing going on. That was one of the things that I really loved during that time that they were imprisoned there. Another one that I really liked was Claire's quick draw McGraw. I mean, when she pulled that pistol out of her pocket and let Ezra have it, and she shot him, and then he said, "You shot me," and she said, "Yes, and I'll do it again if you don't get out of here." So he got out of there. I'm not sure he really would have been able to do that, being shot in the stomach like that, but we can talk about that when we get to the medical. And then the third thing that I really liked about being the in-house part was Adso striding across the room in front of the camera. That's just like a cat, isn't it? I mean, could be bedlam everywhere else, but the cat is king or queen, and he's going to have his own place in time and his own things to say about anything. And I just thought that was beautiful and a perfect example. And then he's peacefully eating his dinner, I just thought that was cool.
Yeah. The other thing that worked for me, and it has worked for me this entire season, was the cinematography. The way this episode was shot was so beautiful. The close-up shots, and when they pan out to the wide stuff, and how they shot from an angle, so you could see things from on high looking down, and then you're at ground level. It was just artistic, clever, impactful, the way that good cinematography is supposed to be. And then the indoor shots were just magic. And then the outdoor shots, the outdoor scenes, when they're riding across and you see the CGI Blue Ridge Mountains in the background, which didn't look like CGI.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The only reason I know it's CGI is because I know they're not really in North Carolina with the Blue Ridge Mountains. But it just looks so seamless. And then the wide shot with the panoramic shot with them riding in the last scene, just gorgeous. Everything about the cinematography in this episode was just gorgeous. I have to tip my hat to the director. I have to tip my hat to the director and his cinematographer. That just worked on every level for me.
Agree. I'm going to say the economy of scenes, and I don't know if that falls with the director or with the writer or both, but there were several scenes that had very few, if any, words, which moved the story forward and let you know exactly what was going on, like when Lizzie comes running out to tell Ian what's going on. Very few words there. Very short scene, very effective. Same thing as you said, Catherine, when Tom is looking at Claire and Jamie sees him looking at Claire and then puts it together. No words, very effective. And And let's see, the other one I loved is when they showed Claire in the wagon sleeping, and she just, her finger twitched. It was like this long, but it told you, okay, Claire's been sleeping, Jamie's awake, time has passed. I just thought those devices, in order to, because so much happened in this episode, and those were beautiful ways to let us know what was happening without taking a lot of time. There was hardly any verbiage, and I just thought it was so clever and so intelligent. I really appreciated it.
That finger twitch got me too, because I was like, is it that they're showing, is it they want us to think that she's having a nightmare, and she's sort of like, you know how for lack of a better example, you know, like when dogs are in their sleep and it's like they look like they're chasing somebody, but I couldn't tell. It's like, or is it because she's a surgeon and and
That
she's
she was
used to
just
using her
asleep.
hand? Yeah, I mean, I know, but I mean, but that's an indication though, is that if her hand twitches, there's something going on that made it happen.
Yeah.
And was it because she was dreaming, or because um she was injured, or because whatever it was, there was an indicate. I felt it indicated something, and I was just thinking about what it would indicate.
Well, it could indicate her Golgi tendons, isn't it? Is that release? That's what make you twitch. So she's finally relaxing. I don't know.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's lots of different reasons, and that made me think about them.
Yeah, right.
But I noticed it. It was like that could have been left out, and no one would have noticed. But it was one of those little things that was put in there, and you're like, why?
I thought the stoning scene was quite well done, and it was a complex scene with a lot of players in it, and horses, as you say, Courtney, were part of the team effort too. And I thought it was really well choreographed. I loved it when Claire delivered that right jab to the guy in the face. I mean, it was so fast. I went back and tried to capture it, a picture of it, and I couldn't. I mean, it was just like bam, bam, I thought that was extremely well done. But also, in the book, she's riding a horse when they start to stone her. So she's out in the open. And if you remember, a young boy does it, and she jumps off her horse and she grabs him and throttles him. She bounces his head off the ground and is really gives him something to think about if he can afterwards. And this was a different adaptation of that, but I just thought how awful it would be to be stoned. That is just it's a horrible thing, and it's an ancient ritual amongst some peoples. And it's how terrifying it would be to be so vulnerable and have no weapons to protect you. And Jamie did what was in the book. He covered her to try to protect her from, and took stones in his back and his side and so forth, rather than, by then she had already been hit a few times. But I just thought it was extremely well done. And then Tom intervening with his weapon in order to make people, he tried to do it by shouting and, by getting Brown, and Brown tried to shout, and then he got hit in the head with a rock himself, which he thoroughly deserved. Yeah. He thoroughly deserved it. So I really thought that was a really great scene.
The other thing that worked for me is just overall, there was just a sense of sophistication to the show. The whole of season 6 has had that, because it's been done at such a high level. Even the episodes that I thought were missed, that even the one and a half episode I thought was a misstep, there has just been a patina of, it's not gloss, because gloss would imply that it was superficial, but it's like high level TV. You know what I mean? So this is something that I would pay to watch if it was a movie. kind of thing. I mean, we are paying on Stars to watch it, but you know what I mean? What's working for me is the whole, grown up, sophisticated feel of this production. We sort of had a renaissance of that in season 5, and it set up season 6 perfectly. The ball was handed off, and they have not dropped the ball. So I was just thrilled by this episode. It was a real grand finale.
I believe that this season is elevated beyond season 5.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Not even a question.
So the other thing that worked for me was the double storyline. Actually, I forget which episode that it kind of felt a little more awkward, but I liked the going to Roger and Brie, the break, to go to that for some relief. I thought it was cute and sweet, and it was nice, when they do the transition and you see the trees and okay, we're going to their little road trip. I liked that. And that also the adaptation of the lice / birthmark scene worked for me the way they did it. Parts of it didn't work, but overall I thought it was a good choice, and it was important to have it in there, and I thought it was well done.
Okay.
Believe it or not, okay, Sophie worked for me in this episode.
Yeah,
I felt that
it worked for me too.
I felt that she carried the scenes that she was in, which isn't often the case, but in this case, like her sheer joy when it became clear that Roger, that they both realized that Jimmy is Roger's son, and there's no question anymore, especially after they had that conversation about, what are they going to tell him when you talk about children being adopted or children, whatever. And it's like, and his story is even more complicated than that. And that he can travel through stone, and that, he may leave one day, choose to leave one day because he's able to. And her facial expression was like, oh, like she was like, oh shit, you're right. And then just the joy in her face, the awkwardness in their love scene. She just did a good job in every scene she was in and carried the scenes, I felt.
I thought so too. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, is part of what we are experiencing from her because she is uptight on the ridge because she doesn't want to accidentally let people know that she's from the past? Or she was so relaxed in this because she could just be in her time, saying things. It was just the 3 of them. I wondered about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I
Or
was just
Catherine
saying
said-
to myself that in this episode, the Roger and Brie felt authentic in this episode. I bought into their relationship as a couple. That it felt real to me, and I really, really liked them. I like feeling that they were real. I still have an issue with their love scenes because I don't think that there is that physical chemistry between them that makes those scenes seem less choreographed and stilted. I think Sophie looks uncomfortable in those scenes, and I feel uncomfortable watching them in those intimate scenes because I buy them their relationship, but I'm not sure I buy them as a couple madly and deeply in love, but still I really liked how I felt about their relationship in this episode. I know that's sort of contradictory, but that's
okay.
how I feel.
I want to say, go back to the first time we see Tom Christie in this episode, just briefly.
Yeah.
When the crowd parts, kind of like Moses, and he comes striding into the light, he looks like a man who has just been through soul wringing self examination. His hair is on end. He looks exhausted. I just think he's had a really difficult period of time between learning of what happened to Malva. And, you know, he's probably been berating himself for not being a better father. That's what I would do as a mother if I were in that position and had a child that I lost through some means like that. I just thought he was fabulous in portraying that he was basically broken by the horrific series of events that his stepdaughter was involved in, and broken by what it had done to Jamie and Claire's life, because I don't think he thinks either one of them are guilty of what people are accusing them of, and I don't think he believes it. And so I thought he was terrific in that short segment there, but and then negotiating until he was able to put himself on the line in order to ensure their safety.
Yeah. Let's stop and talk about him for just a minute. Do you guys think he's in love with Claire?
Yes.
Oh, that's clear.
Yeah. I mean, it was, even if it wasn't clear at the beginning, it was definitely clear with the look. I mean, he looked anguished. He could see she was tired. You could see she was hurting, and he looked anguished.
Yes.
I mean, he had tears in his eyes. He looked exhausted, but he was still worried about her, and the fact that he kept bringing her food, and then
his food.
Yeah, that the food that and then Jamie was kind of picked up on. He was like back and looking at him, and he was so engrossed in looking at Claire, he didn't even notice Jamie looking at him.
Yeah.
And if we weren't clear at that point, definitely at the end when he kind of touched her hand and he said, "I won't allow anything to happen."
Yeah.
And okay, well, he knows that she's married to Jamie. Number one. So what do we think about that? Number two, when did he fall in love with her?
I think it
was
was around the time that she helped his hand, did his hand.
Yes, I do too.
When he did the surgery on
Yeah.
his hand.
I think I don't know that I would say that he recognized it at that he was aware of it, but I think he was falling in love with her at that time. She was just such a unique woman, and he had, he'd not apparently had much success with women, and known any that were intelligent and accomplished and giving and loving like Claire is. And I just think he was kind of swept off his feet, so to speak.
Part of the way that Jamie felt when this exotic creature landed in his life. Never seen anybody like her before. Never experienced a woman like this who spoke as she did, who acted as she did, and who had the knowledge and the skills that she did. So the same way she bowled Jamie over, she did the same thing to poor Tom Christie. He'd never expected to come and meet somebody like her on the ridge, for sure. Yeah. And I think the fact that she's married to Jamie makes it more of a stake through the heart for him, because all his envy, everything that all the animus that he feels towards Jamie, because he feels that Jamie, being a Jacobite and a Highlander, he was Tom Christie was a Jacobite too, but he looks down on Highlanders. I mean, wasn't he in the book? Wasn't he? Yeah.
He wasn't a Jacobite, though, I don't think.
Well, he was an Ardsmuir.
He was, but it was because he was supplying them he was a lowlander and he was supplying them with supplies, but I don't know that he was.
I mean, he was supporting them. He wasn't for the crown.
That's true. That's true, but I never got the impression that he was hook, line, and sinker for Bonnie Prince Charlie.
I don't think so. But he wasn't on the side of the king. And so all of that, I mean, why he must be thinking to himself, why? Why has God brought him here to do this to him? The first time he discovers love, it is for the wife of Jamie Fraser. He must think that God hates him.
That sucked.
That's very sad. I feel for him. And I think that he has come to the realization that since he knows that Jamie and Claire aren't responsible for Malva, I think perhaps he is looking elsewhere, and where he's looking is another source of anguish for him. So in this episode, my heart broke a little bit for Tom Christie.
Oh yeah,
And
I mean,
it is, and it is a testament to Mark Lewis Jones's performance that he has brought us from
To the point where
absolutely
we actually
despising
feel sympathy
Tom
for him.
Christie.
yeah, no, I
To the
felt sympathy
point-
for him.
Yeah, where we said, oh my God, not that I wanted to hug him, but I didn't want to kill him. As I had in previous episodes.
But he
Well,
went from being kind of gross to almost kind of sexy towards the end. Yeah, sexy old man.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I
No,
thought he's like,
I
certainly
can see it.
appealing.
I can
Yeah.
see it.
I
can
can
see
I
it.
too.
see it. Yeah.
Well, and it's,
Listen,
I mean,
that's not quality that he has in there. You need to watch the series Keeping the Faith. That's where I first saw him.
Mm.
When he started out in that series, he was a gross character. And by the end of it, I was rooting for him so hard.
but did you have the hots for him?
Yeah. He did this. not for that character. I didn't have the heart for that character. But I could see, something in Tom that was quite appealing by the time we got to the end.
Yeah, no, he seemed like a man
Yeah.
for the first time. Like
Exactly.
and so the reason I asked that is, I don't know if you guys know who Diane Manning is. She's somebody who watches us, and she is a very active fan, but she made a comment after last week's discussion where, when I said, does Tom love Malva? And Catherine said yes, because he had tears in his eyes when Claire was saying what she said. She said, I think he has tears in his eyes because I said he's cracked open. She thinks that's the moment he cracked open and fell so hard for Claire. And as I thought about it, I could see with the character, because there's Claire covered in blood, being accused of murder, and she, in such a Christ-like way, is finding good things to say about his condemned child who's lying there with her throat cut. So I could see how religious zealot Tom Christie is like, oh my God, this woman is like that. She's his new religion almost.
Don't you think that that's the moment that he realized it? But I think he's been falling in love with her throughout the episodes. Whenever you see him around her, he has changed from the way he was at the beginning until up until this very episode. He was getting softer and more patient and kind to her. And I think that's all an indication of his growing affection. But it could be that is the moment, as you say in the last episode, when he realized how he felt about
I thought it was an interesting thought. And the other thing is that there's a transformation happening in him, just being around Claire and Jamie and seeing Jamie's God and their marriage as compared to the way he's thinking. And I feel that now there's this rift. He's gone through this transformation. His eyes are open, and he's surrounded by these awful fisher folk and Al and Malva. And it's like, like he can't,
and his son
and Alan, and he can't transform those people. And they've wrecked Claire and Jamie's lives. And he
And
knows
he
this.
brought them there.
He had
Yeah,
never
he
come
brought them
there.
there. That's right.
None of this would have happened. So I think
Mhm.
all that's eating at him, all of
Yeah.
it, because he's an
Mhm.
intelligent man.
Yes, yes.
And he has depth, and he's a thinker. And I think that Mark Lewis Jones has done such a phenomenal. I can't imagine anyone doing a better job with that character. I can't even.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I was rooting for another actor to be cast who I thought would have just been wonderful. But now that I've seen his performance, I can't imagine anybody else doing it and doing it justice. Because I think I commented on Twitter that, you know, Tom Christie could easily have been played as your run-of-the-mill villain bad guy. But he just brought so much depth and nuance that it, you know, even with a good script, if you don't have somebody, an actor who can go there and bring that out, it wouldn't work. And once again, the casting is just spot on.
He realized that character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's go to least favorite scenes. Carmen?
You know, I had to really search for something that there wasn't anything that I didn't like, but I'd say my least favorite scene, and I'm sorry, whoever said they liked this, was Brie musing to Roger about her parents should have told her what she was. Her parents didn't know she could time travel. That was something that didn't make sense to me. Now, maybe if she had said she wished that they had told her who her mother was and what her mother could do, that made sense. But, you know, they were talking about why didn't they tell her who she was, that she could time travel, but they wouldn't have known that. They didn't know that.
I think Frank knew. That's why he made sure she knew how to
Brie?
shoot. I think
Wait,
Frank,
wait.
Oh,
I-
wait.
Wait. I think she's talking about not telling her that Jamie's her father
that's what I thought she meant.
versus the time traveling.
No,
Oh.
because I don't
I
think
thought they were
so.
musing about whether they should tell Jemmy he could time travel, but she was talking about the fact that her mother time traveled and that her father was Jamie and not Frank, and that Frank asked her mother not to say anything, and that's what I thought that conversation was about.
Yeah, that's how
I'll
what I
have to
thought
go
too.
back and listen to it then. That makes sense about Jane, you know, who the father
Mhm.
was, but it could have been that her mother was a time traveler too.
Yeah,
I
that
don't
too.
know exactly what it meant, but I thought that was that walk was a little too long and maybe a little too much talky. But anyway, that would be something that I thought that I wasn't too crazy about. I didn't think it was bad or anything like that. It was just probably my least favorite.
Antoinette, did you
Yeah.
have a least favorite?
Well, I mean, I've already intimated that it was the intimate scene with Roger and Brie for the reasons that I said in terms of not feeling any chemistry between them. And I'm wondering why the production wants to almost pit the two couples against each other. Because, you know, they did it in 501, where everybody was getting it on in 501. But we knew that there was going to be an intimate scene between Claire and Jamie. And then they put one in the same episode, not very far apart, between Brie and Roger. And Brie and Roger must suffer by comparison, not because the scene itself wasn't well done, but because I think people are much more invested in the Jamie and Claire relationship. So that would maybe be more appealing. I mean, let me not say people, me. I am more invested in the Jamie and Claire relationship. And I don't really care about the Brie and Roger relationship, even though I've liked it this season. But them as man and wife and as lovers, I have never bought into it. And this scene did not change my mind. So it was my least favorite scene of the episode.
I wonder if if it wasn't done, because there are quite a few fans that do like Brie and Roger and think that they have fine chemistry and it works for them. It doesn't work for me either, Antoinette, but but maybe it's done for the fans, you know, who do like the story of Brie and Roger.
Mhm. Yeah, could be.
I personally think that they listened to you, Antoinette, and they had them in the same episode to juxtapose the style that of their lovemaking, because you have always said, let them find their own way. Don't try to make them make love like Jamie and Claire. And theirs was very different. I thought it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
playful
Very
and, you know, they're gonna be
klutzy.
a couple. Yeah, I mean, realistic. If you're all awkward in a tent and you're pregnant and the cars in there in your back and all that stuff.
Mhm.
You know, and they're all talking about 20th century stuff like they would. And I bought that scene.
I didn't say the scene wasn't well done, you know, it was well done.
Yeah.
It's just that it doesn't do nothing for me.
Yeah, I
I
gotcha.
never will.
I mean, I would rather watch Jamie and Claire all day, but it worked for me.
Fair enough.
I
So
thought it was their best one they've done
Brie and Roger.
Yeah.
Me too. I
so far.
I think they just listened to Antoinette. Because
As they should.
honestly, I did not have a least favorite scene. I didn't. Yeah.
Nice.
Catherine, you?
And like I said at the beginning, my favorite scene and my least favorite scene were actually the same for different reasons. It
Interesting.
was Brie and Roger. It was my favorite because I thought it was very realistic. I thought it was well done, but it was my least favorite because I didn't think it was necessary. It just didn't seem like it didn't need to be in there. And I didn't understand why they put it in there. It's like, oh, oops, we haven't shown them making love all season. Look, let's put it in here now. No, but that was my least favorite also. And then, you know, my other was, you know, poor Jen, he's a cute little kid. I'm like, everyone else it's like supposed to be years in the making, but he's the same age he was
German
in
is
last
the same.
season.
German
He's about 4, don't you think?
Yeah, I
But
think
isn't
he's
he
about
supposed
4.
to be older at this point?
I don't know.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
I
wasn't
don't
he the
remember
same
either.
actor in the same
He's
show
supposed to
they
be a
used in London?
redhead too.
Yes, he's supposed
Like
to.
I
thought
saw him
about
as
that.
like an Irish looking kind of stocky redhead.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He's a
Yeah,
Jamie.
so-
He looks like Jamie.
Okay,
Oh.
what did not work for you, Carmen?
We all did that.
I wish that Jamie and Claire both had denied some of the accusations that were thrown at them. Like Richard said, you know, you laid with a woman who wasn't your wife, and Jamie just stands there and looks at him and doesn't say anything. I think they should have said, what the hell? No, I didn't do that.
Why didn't he? That was one of my
I
questions.
don't know. I don't know that.
Never to anyone.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't
And-
have made any difference.
Yeah, but it would to us. It would to me. I defend myself if I'm not guilty of something, you know, and somebody accuses me of something. I make a point of saying, oh, wait a minute, I did not do that, or I did not mean that.
Yeah.
Here's what I meant. And I would have preferred that he had been more assertive. He is you know, he's not afraid of anything. So maybe he just thought, you know, it's not worth fiddling with, and I'm not going to change his mind anyway. I don't know. And then there
Well-
was something that somebody said about Claire, and she also didn't respond.
When Richard Brown is saying, well, you're a murderess, when she's in the wagon
Oh, that's
Mhm.
right. Yeah.
and she
That's
doesn't
probably it.
answer. Well, I thought maybe Jamie didn't say anything because he didn't want to start a riot. You know, maybe he thought
Maybe.
it would incite
Well,
the
yeah, I
crowd or
think
something.
Jamie didn't say anything because he knows that Lionel Brown doesn't believe that shit.
Richard Brown.
He's just seized on it. He's just
But there
seized
are
on it
other
as an
people
excuse
there.
for revenge. Other people do, but they've already said that it wasn't them. And the Fisher folk have already made it clear that they don't believe them. So I
well-
don't think, I mean, if I was in that position, because the more you say you didn't do it, the more guilty you sound. Because it's like when Jamie said to Claire in the barn, I won't apologize, because if I apologize, it means that I've done something to apologize for.
Well, you're the
Jamie thinks
attorney,
that
so you would
he-
know
no,
better than me,
no,
but I'm
no,
just
I
telling,
think-
but I understand and I see how you feel about it, but I would have preferred that they had said something, both of them, in retort to all of the accusations that are laid at their feet.
Mhm.
That's the only thing that didn't work. Everything else worked for me.
Fair enough.
Okay, I had a couple of things. The badass scene with Claire and Ezra, which was badass. Do you guys really think that she could have dug into her skirt pocket, gotten out that gun, cocked it,
No.
and shot it with him 3 feet away before he was able to
Got
defend
her.
himself? Yeah, no.
Well, I mean, he had a long gun, It's not that he had a little pistol. I mean, it takes a minute to get that long gun up and
No, he
aimed,
would have
and
just
she was-
knocked it out of her hand or something. I mean,
She wasn't close enough for him to lock the small gun. He could have pushed away the long gun, but she shot him with a smaller gun. I thought that was believable.
did you?
Well,
Okay.
I didn't.
I thought it would be unlikely she could get it out of her pocket so quick.
Exactly.
I thought-
Quickly, because
it
it's
would
got
have
all
been
of
more
these little
believable.
knobs on it, and everything that would catch on your seams when you go to pull it
Yeah.
out.
She probably would have shot herself in the foot, most likely.
I would have been more believable she shot him through her skirt, but then not.
Yeah, that would have
Yeah.
been
Oh,
good.
that would
Ah,
have been really good.
that would have been good.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it.
I just think the whole scene was just flowing so fast, the adrenaline. I love that. I love that moment. I love that Annie Oakley moment when she just whipped that pistol out.
I did
Because
too.
that was one of my favorite lines. Yeah, shot me. And I said to myself, damn right she did.
Yep. No, it was a great scene. I loved it. But when I was looking for, was it realistic? I was like, I don't know. Then the other part is during the lice scene. I don't know if you guys have ever had your kids have lice. I have. A, it doesn't just go away when you cut their hair. And B, Bree's like putting her hair next to his saying, oh, his hair is so beautiful. And I've gotten lice for my kids. You are
Mhm.
not going to do that, nor are you going to use the same comb on your husband that you just combed through your lice-ridden kid's
Child.
hair. So that part of the lice scene, I was like, okay, these two people are not parents, clearly, because they're like, oh, like when you, no. So that was the
I
only
didn't
thing.
even think of that because
I did.
I didn't even think of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Because none of my kids are, I never had
And
any
all
experience with
that Brie
lice.
hair and that Roger hair and his beard, like, no. Things I noticed, Carmen.
Yeah, in the intro, Mrs. Bug is standing talking to Jamie and Claire, and she says, Malva confessed to carrying Mr. Fraser's child. In church, she did not say it was Mr. Fraser's child in that confession. Mrs. Bug said that's what she said, but that is not what she said. She implied that there was somebody she trusted who had gotten her with child and taken away her innocence, but she did not say it was Mr. Fraser in the church. She said it in his study to the family, but she did not say it, name the father in the church. No one seemed overly concerned about Ezra being shot. He comes staggering over there, leans on the wagon or whatever it is, and nobody's paying any attention to him. And then it's not until he dies, and then Oaks gets, oh my buddy, you killed him. But until then, nobody paid any attention to the guy.
It's
I
true.
thought that
Richard
was-
Brown didn't even look at him.
No,
But he's like leaning on the barrel, like, oh.
Yeah. Exactly. Why would Claire ask Jamie not to recite the prayer of contrition in French? She speaks French.
Probably because Sam doesn't really speak French.
Yeah.
So it's to show that he speaks it, but not really make him speak it.
That's a good point. Well done. Did you notice Richard's dirty fingernails? I thought that was very realistic. When
Yeah.
you're out, and you're riding and camping out and everything, it's very hard to keep your grooming under control. Wilmington from Grandfather Mountain, which is in the region where supposedly Fraser's Ridge is 300 miles away. Cross Creek is 200. So it would be, they're about right around there. They're about 90 miles between Cross Creek and Wilmington. And remember, the guy says, but when Richard Brown comes back from Salzburg, he says, we can't do anything there because the sheriff's gone and the circuit court's closed down. We're going to have to go to Wilmington. The guy says, well, let's go to Cross Creek. And I thought, oh, well, they're only about 20 miles apart. No, they're not. They're 93 miles apart. So he was right. It is much closer to Cross Creek than it would have been to Wilmington. So I noticed that. I thought that it was interesting that the town that Claire is jailed in, now I don't know if that's supposed to be Wilmington, really was trashed. And there was somebody was hung in effigy, and there were buildings and wagons turned over and buildings damaged and things like that. And there wasn't any explanation. I hope we're going to get that explanation.
Yeah.
And then did Jamie ever get to pee?
No.
I don't think he did when he was going into the trees, and there's this guardian angel, Christ, this guardian angel standing in front of him. I didn't ever see him get to pee, the poor guy.
No.
Probably have to use a chamber pot like Claire. Those are the things I noticed.
I noticed a lot of the biblical references, not just in the prayer. I mean, I noticed that Jamie's religion and everything has been a lot more to the forefront in this season, and I really like that. But they misquoted the Bible when Jamie said, "Justice is mine," says the Lord. The Lord doesn't say that. He says, "Vengeance is mine," says the Lord. That's correct. That's the accurate quote. And then what's his name, Brown, when the guy falls off dead and he says, let the dead bury their dead. That's what Jesus said when they came and told him that Lazarus was dead. And shouldn't he come? Or Lazarus was dying, and he said, let the dead bury their dead. So I noticed all the biblical references. I kind of like it.
Yeah. I looked that up actually. Some Bible something site, and because I was like, what does he mean by that? And what it said was Jesus was saying, let the dead of spirit go bury the dead. You who are following me are not dead of spirit, so you have better things to do basically than bury dead people. Let the dead of spirit bury the dead. That was the interpretation that I read.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I've just always known that quote. I never put that explanation on it. I think, we were taught that because Jesus knew that Lazarus wasn't really, that he planned to raise Lazarus from the dead. That's why he wasn't bothered and he wasn't in any hurry to go there. And he said, let other people deal with it, because he always knew that he was going to go there and raise him from the dead. That's what we were taught.
Well, there's so many interpretations of the Bible. They talked about that in Hebrew, dead can also mean like not relevant, dead. So who knows? I had a class on the Bible one time. We spent 3 weeks on the first sentence because there are so many translations.
Okay.
It was
3 weeks?
fascinating. Yeah, 3 classes.
God.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I noticed some things. I noticed that Claire kills people again in the show. And I think it's awesome. We've commented before how they've shied away from that. I noticed that Sam had on his action wig for the fighting scenes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of more of a
moved and, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a looser, probably more stuck on, but looser. I noticed that he sleeps in that all-day ponytail, his not action wig, which I think would be really uncomfortable. I don't know why they don't have like a long hair, just a down hair wig for him for night, but maybe that's too much trouble. I don't know. I noticed they didn't blow out the candles before they knocked the table over, which I was like,
You're gonna set
Wow.
your house on fire. I thought I saw the same thing.
Well, shots are flying, you know. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true, but I noticed that Jemmy
Mhm.
really is adorable, but he really does look more like Ed Spaliers than either Sophie or Richard to me.
That's the bad news.
Nevis or no Nevis. Adso, did you guys notice how much food they gave Adso?
Yes.
That's a lot of food.
Yeah, I was like, didn't they just have a piece of bread and like a small, I don't know where that came from.
I don't know what it was.
some kind of meat like pork or
Looked like it.
did you guys notice that Arch didn't have a weapon? He didn't seem to have a weapon when he came with the
Mm.
I had
I
to
noticed
laugh.
there were a few that didn't.
Yeah,
There
what-
were some in the front who had them and others didn't.
The
little
Ardsmuir men
Ardsmuir.
had.
The three
Mhm.
Ardsmuir men had weapons, but
Mhm.
it was them and Arch and the women. That was it.
when the
Because but we
Ardsmuir,
have never seen Arch, you know, the Arch of the books with his axe and whatnot. And,
Yeah, but you would
and
think-
he didn't go to rescue Claire either. So
Yeah, but
they're
you-
not playing the Arch of the books.
I know, but you would think it's 18th century. Hey, we're being attacked. You know, he's got a gun at home. He's not going to just run out and be like, I'm here. I'm this old man. What am I going to do? You know, like, wouldn't he carry something? I don't know.
He was probably planning to talk them to death. I don't
His butcher knife.
know.
Did you guys notice Bird, who sings in the mornings, coloration changes here?
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm, mhm.
Was that like
Tattoos?
a sunburn, maybe?
I don't
Maybe
know. I
it
thought it
was
was
pink.
Oh,
just.
you're
it
not
was
talking
it was
about
a
the
dye.
tattoo he had there.
No, he had like a line across and going up. I thought it was
Well,
just
no, it just
intentional.
looked like he was very
Sunburned.
like, yeah, like he was a one color here, and then this all was a
Oh,
different
I didn't
color.
notice that. I thought whatever he had paint on
Paint
his
on him.
face is what I thought.
I thought it was
But-
paint. Like
No,
war
not paint, but you know, like some coloration.
Yeah,
I saw the difference in the coloration too, but I thought it could be heat, you know, from
Mhm.
this, or the exercise of riding the horse
Exactly.
furiously, or
and
know,
doing
fleshing from
multiple takes of that.
yeah, right.
Yeah. Gary took it on the chin this time.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah, because that was Wilmington, and I noticed for the first time it wasn't muddy.
Mm-hmm.
Every other time it's been muddy, but that's all messed up, and now his house is all messed up. It's terrible.
Was it
Um,
Wilmington? Was it supposed to be? Did you read this
Yeah.
script?
No,
It's
but I
Wilmington.
remembered that the location.
Mhm.
Oh.
That's what Wilmington was.
Okay.
And the last one I'll say is, I wonder if that wagon set, do you think it was on like some kind of
oh,
stick-
the one that Jamie and Claire. were-
yeah, some kind
Yeah,
of
definitely.
Yeah.
It was on a
Yeah.
it was on a what they call them, not a pulley, a thing, a trolley thing. I
yeah,
forget. There's a technical name for it, but I forget that. Yeah, that
something
was
where they
definitely
could
on
make
that.
it wiggle around. It wasn't like
No,
I
they
know when
weren't
they-
riding. They weren't being pulled by horses when they were.
They wouldn't
swamping
do that when
in
she
the
was
interior.
pregnant. They
No,
wouldn't
I-
put her in a wagon like that when she was pregnant and pull her a long rough ground.
yeah, no, I knew that wasn't the case, but in season 3 when they were on the boats, you know, they had to pretend. Whoa, they
A
had to like
gimbal.
pretend
A
that it was
gimbal. That's what they call them. A gimbal.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I noticed when they're in Wilmington, there was a big letters "join" on the wall. So what it
Join or
kind of
die.
looked like is that there was a fight, and there was a British flag on the floor, on the
Mhm.
ground, and a British soldier, as Carmen mentioned, in effigy hung from a post. So it seemed like the town had been taken over by
Sons of Liberty.
Sons of
Rebels.
Liberty.
Ah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
And I don't know how that's going to
Yes.
play out with
Yes. I like
because
it. I
the
like it.
because the Browns were loyalists, if I understood correctly. And so
I
because
don't
they
think,
were
I think they're
they were
brownists.
well they're opportunists, but
Yeah.
I think that they were known for being the
Oh, the Committee of Safety.
law enforcement for the British.
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's going to play out in some kind of a way.
Could be. That's a
Um,
good, good.
the other thing that I noticed were the freckles on either Sam or his body double's upper thigh. But I don't know why. I just noticed he had freckles. Probably because I have freckles on my thigh. So I was like, oh, he's got freckles too.
In what scene?
In the love
Yeah.
scene.
When love
Oh,
scene.
okay.
They were
That
showing
wasn't a body
his
double,
thigh.
that
They
was
were showing
Sam.
her. Yeah, they showed his butt quite a bit.
Yeah, we haven't seen his
Um,
butts in season 3.
yeah. So I'm not sure if it was his or not, but it was
Oh, it
because they
was,
didn't show
I
his
think it
face
was
at the time.
his.
I think so
Carmen
too.
knows. Carmen knows. Okay, well, let's go to medical anatomical.
So of course we're going to bring in the hereditary, the nevus and hereditary stuff. And and Carmen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I always remembered that the ones that were most hereditary were also the ones that were most dangerous, and that often caused the most problems. So
Melanoma.
yeah, and then or they're usually eye related, or they were usually hyperpigmented, and they were dangerous to have. I mean, if they were hereditary, and so that's when they said that. I didn't have a chance to really look it up, but I just remember thinking, wait a minute, you don't want it to be hereditary. it's like that's not something to celebrate. So it's almost like saying, oh, I have a mole here and he has a mole here, so he must be my son. It just wasn't realistic to me. It was cute, but it wasn't scientifically sound. When I thought about the guy being shot in the stomach, and when Claire was saying, you know, she should do something, and I was thinking, there's nothing you can do. You shot a guy in the stomach, and he's gonna get septic and he's gonna die. I mean, that was like the gut shots are the worst shots. And so, and one of the things I actually, which medical, I was glad they did not do, is have her, in spite of the fact that these men were taking her to be hanged, essentially, that she was still going to be, I need to take care of them, and I need to be the doctor, you know, and I'm glad they did not do that this time. They've done it in the past, and it's so annoying because I'm like, look, you know, yes, we're altruistic. Yes, we want to help. Yes, this whole do no harm thing, which really isn't all that true, but we're still human, and we can still like F you, no, you know, and, you know, there are times, unless somebody, you know, there have been a few times, yeah, you know, I've been people screaming and yelling, insulting me, and I've still had to do stuff, you know, in an emergency room, in an emergency situation. But other than that, you're not going to completely set aside your own personal circumstances to, you know, and put yourself in more danger, set yourself up more to be considered a witch, set yourself more to be considered, you know, different from other women. It was her doctoring that got her in trouble with the first brother, Lionel brother. So I was just glad they didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about some of the things, like I said before, he said it was the piece, the rifle that she gave him was a fowling piece, but what she pulled out of her pocket, I couldn't really see. It looked like a musket of some kind. That shot a ball, and I just can't see. Those things plowed through tissue. They were so huge and they were very hot, so they would also sear tissue as they went through, but it would just plow through by virtue of kinetic energy. I don't think he would be walking around after that. I'm sorry, but I think he probably would be on his back or face. I did want to make a mention about head lice. They do feed on blood, so they bite, and they feed on human blood, and they are a human parasite. They live not only on our scalp hair, but they're also in people's eyelashes, and they also get into their eyebrows. Now, there's also mites that live in almost everybody has eyebrow mites, but head lice are something else. They're really nasty. The mites don't live on blood. About the nevi, I was unable to find any confirmation that an individual nevus is hereditary. The tendency toward nevi, multiple nevi, is found apparently in some families. And they do, like Catherine said, they can progress to melanoma or something worse. In the book, well, I'm not sure there's anything too much worse than melanoma. That's pretty bad, although now people are surviving from it a little more frequently. In the book, Diana says that he has a birthmark there, and it's in the same spot, the same kind of birthmark that Roger has, but that too is not scientific because birthmarks are not in that kind of accuracy, or that kind of transmission from generation to generation doesn't occur. So it's not scientific, the business about the nevi, and it doesn't prove that Jimmy is his son. No, and
Yeah.
and
birthmarks really are nothing but large freckles anyway.
Yeah, they're not, and nevi there's different kinds, but they're heavily pigmented areas. Honestly, the one in his head looked just like a smudge. It didn't really look like a nevi to me, I gotta say.
It looked like crayon.
And I thought Sophie has some really good shoulder muscles and upper arm muscles. I don't know if you noticed when she's naked, astride Roger, but she's been working out, that girl has. So I was impressed with her muscle definition there. And then I was really disheartened when the sheriff took Claire's traveling kit away from Tom. He tried to pass it to her, and the sheriff took it. And I don't know if she'll ever see it again, but I kind of think maybe Tom will get it back for her. We'll see. But there wasn't a lot, I didn't feel. I thought the fact that they actually showed Claire after the stoning with blood on her face, I was glad to see that, because usually they don't show her a lot of injury, although they did in the finale of last year. But I thought that was really good. He didn't show too much injury afterwards, after having been hit with several stones. But that's all. There wasn't much medical in this one.
There wasn't,
I don't
other
feel.
than, but the lice, even though you describe what it is, but it's easily transmittable that her putting her head next to his, like Courtney mentioned before, spread that, using the same comb on his head and using it the same comb and scissors, and then
she might not
using
know
any type of really the only way to, in that situation, they could, obviously they didn't have the any type of medicated shampoo or anything else, would have been to kill them by suffocation, by just putting grease over.
Yeah, they say that doesn't work. What I read today,
WebMD it actually, interestingly, people say it doesn't, but if you notice, in one of the reasons, apart from the fact that we have curly hair, you don't often see a lot of lice in Black children, and mainly it's because we use hair grease.
They use what?
Hair grease. We use hair grease in our hair.
And actually,
you don't see lice very often in.
Well, I guess there's a number of home remedies I read about, including mayonnaise and things like that. And at least WebMD says that it doesn't work. They didn't specify anything about the ethnicity that they were referring to. However, I do have to say,
because there have been some speculations because of the curliness of hair, but the thing is that doesn't make sense because it attaches to skin. They attach to skin mostly anyway. They'll crawl around in hair, but they mostly attach to skin. So even
they're feeding off from the flesh.
Exactly. So the curliness of our hair doesn't make sense. And so the speculation was that it's because of the products that we put in our hair that kind of prevents the
interesting.
But I do have to say that she might not know that.
Yeah,
she true. Meaning Sophie might not know that those things. And lice are tiny, by the way. They're only about the size of a sesame seed.
Yeah,
they're 2 or 3 millimeters long, and the nits are even smaller. But if you've ever seen one, then you don't ever mistake it again. And they're very fast. They can move quite swiftly.
And that little scratch he did, I'm like, how did you get from him doing this?
Well, I looked back, he was scratching multiple times.
He did. Okay. When he was running, he was scratching one time, and then He said it itches or something like that, and
Oh,
then
Yeah,
that's
I
when
saw
she
that.
looked down
But yeah,
and said,
interesting.
"Oh, he's got lice." They're really pretty nasty
Nasty.
creatures,
Mhm.
actually.
I will say that when my kids got lice, a friend of mine who is Venezuelan who has 4 kids with tons of hair, curly hair, said Claude just put a whole thing of conditioner on their heads and let them sit there. And that's what did it. And I think it was the suffocation, because it's just, I mean, same, just really heavy, thick. And that was finally what did it.
Hmm. Exactly.
I don't know. I'm just
That's
saying,
what I've always recommended to. I mean, I've recommended that more than once, and it works.
Yeah.
And
worked for me.
So
Loy or Lee, if we're finished with medical anatomical.
Oh, well, actually, this episode threw up some legal questions. First of all, Jamie is correct in not wanting Claire to go with them under the guise of trial. Because a lot of people, we tend to impose our modern sensibilities on the shows and not realize of the time period that they're in. Remember, Jamie's experience with a trial was from when he was tried as a traitor in England. And he said all the judge did was read out the charge and say you're guilty and send him down, which was the norm. We are so used to innocent until proven guilty that we think that is how it's always been. That legal maxim, as they call it, wasn't a part of American legal jurisprudence officially until a case in 1874. So wow. The concept of innocent until proven guilty was only used or evolved before then to help to defend people like Jews and witches, because it developed as a means of arguing against using torture to get people to confess so that you could find them guilty. Because before that, it was torture to get people to confess so that you could find them guilty. And so lawyers developed this whole thing about you can't do that. You can't use torture against these marginalized people like Jews and witches. You have to actually prove their guilt by some other means other than torture. But remember that we are in colonial America, and it is English law that rules. And in any kind of trial in that time period, Claire would essentially have to be the one who would have to prove her innocence rather than the judge or whoever proving her guilty. And there's this concept of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. No, that was not part of English law at that time. So, and it's always harder to prove that you haven't done something than for somebody to prove that you had done something. So Claire was really in mortal danger if she was ever taken for trial, because even though they didn't have what is called direct evidence in terms of nobody saw her kill Malva, right? There's no eyewitnesses, but they had circumstantial evidence. And evidence is evidence, no matter if it's direct or circumstantial. And so the circumstantial evidence is very, very strong against Claire. So she would have had a very hard time proving that she didn't, in fact, kill Malva, which is what she would have been required to do. She would have had to prove her innocence, not the other way around, where they would have had to prove she was guilty. So I think Jamie agreed to go with them to buy some time to figure out a way to extricate themselves out of this situation, because Claire would most certainly have been found guilty if she had been gone to trial.
Interesting. Last week, you probably saw it. How would you go about proving Claire's innocence or finding Malva's murderer?
Well, the thing about that is that, as I said, there is different kinds of evidence. You see, we see all these cop shows, you know, Law and Order and all of this stuff, and there's DNA and this, that, and the third, and video evidence. Juries have come to the point where now, if they don't see a video, they don't want to convict because they don't understand that under the law, the testimony of two people is sufficient to establish a fact. So if you can get two people to come and say, yes, he did it, and the jury believes them, that's enough under the law. That's proof that can convict somebody. So in terms of proving Claire's innocence, what they would have had to do is find somebody to confess to the murder.
Mm.
They would have had to find somebody would have had to come forward and confess. Because unless somebody confessed, there is no other evidence that is available that could counterbalance the heavy circumstantial evidence of her being in the middle of the bloody crime scene, holding the knife with the dead baby. You know, if that isn't a slam dunk case for a prosecutor, I don't know what is.
Do you have any comment about Richard Brown coming back from Salzburg and telling Jamie that he was sure to tell everyone that Claire was what she had done? Do you want to comment on that?
They're poisoning. I mean, they didn't have juries in the way that we have juries now, right? But that is a way of sort of poisoning potential witnesses. Because if you plant the story and you already have people believing that she did it, then it will be even more difficult to find somebody or other witnesses to come forward and say, oh, well, maybe she didn't because this, that, and so. So as they go through and are poisoning the potential jury pool or pool of potential witnesses, that makes it even worse for her. Richard Brown is diabolically clever in doing that. But he wasn't doing that because of any eventual trial. He wanted somebody to kill them on the way. He wanted somebody to kill them on the road, you know, by
so he
doing
could go home.
when he was doing that. But, you know, Claire was a goner if she went to trial.
Yeah.
No ifs, ands, or buts.
And they knew that was supposed to happen. That's why they were complaining when they actually had to go to the towns.
Yeah.
Because they were like, you said, well, this is going to be over by now.
Yeah.
We were just going to hang her and go home.
We're just going to draw her out and hang her.
Yeah.
And trust me, that they would have been completely justified.
Interesting. In the eyes of the law, you're saying.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to BTS.
I was waiting for the Ardsmuir men to come, the Ridge people, settlers, to come and help Jamie and Claire. And I thought, why would it take them so long? And then I thought, his land grant is 10,000 acres.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're probably not very close together. And Mrs. Bug was on foot. And so was Joe, or I guess it was Kezzy, and well, whichever one.
One of my
And
spend a lot of
and
time in the
Lizzie,
barn.
yeah, whichever one, were apparently on foot too. And yeah, they were in the barn. That's
Again.
right. I noticed that again. The fowling piece was called Fuchi du Chasse, Fuzi du Chasse, Gun of the Hunt. And it was made into a double barrel by the French. It was available in the 1700s because there's one gun that she has that has two hammers on it. Did you see it? It didn't have two barrels. It should have had two barrels. But anyway, that fowling piece is a pretty cool gun, and it could shoot apparently either birdshot or it shot anywhere between a .64 and a .7 caliber ball. That, you know how big
big.
around that is? That is gigantic.
Wow.
It's huge.
So it just
And,
depends on what you load in there, birdshot or.
Yeah, apparently it
Oh.
could shoot either one. At
Yeah.
least I consulted a Marine friend of mine today, and that's what he told me. So I'm hopeful that he was
Right.
correct about that. He said that those guns are so valuable that those were likely prop guns. He had not seen the episode yet. He is a watcher, but he's a fan, but he's going to go look at it and see. But did you hear the Fisher person who said, "You the fair Sushil"?
Yes.
What did that mean? It sounded almost like sous chef to me.
I looked at
What?
it's Gallic.
Yeah, it's
It's a
Gallic,
s-
obviously.
It's a funny spelling.
Yeah.
I don't even know their letters, so but it sounds like fair social, yeah, and it means prostitute.
Mm.
Mhm.
Oh, wow. That was a deep cut.
Who said that to who?
To Jamie,
the
one of the fishermen says that to Jamie. He said, "You fair Sushil, or however it's pronounced," when he's, insulting him about having fathered Malva's child.
Okay. Oh,
Um,
going back to that, I'm sorry. Remember you said that Mrs. Bug said that Malva told everybody that it was Jamie's child, and Malva didn't say that in the church. That is true. But I think Miss Bug was superimposing her knowledge because she was there listening when Malva accused Jamie of being the father of the child. So
Yeah.
she just added that in the retelling.
yes, and that's what gossip is.
Exactly.
Well, and she was also trying to kind of get Claire. That's when she was building the case and saying, "You must have hated her."
Mhm.
Yes.
So she was
Yes.
trying to get Claire to say, "I did, I murdered her," or whatever,
Yes, but
confession.
the other thing that I noticed is that there was an awful lot of Scotch broom on the hillsides as they were riding through the valleys, and Scotch broom didn't get brought to North Carolina until the 1800s. Gorsh neither. So it's not a big deal. It's just something that I noticed when I saw that. I thought, now I know it was brought to our side of the country too by a Scotsman, and we have a lot of it in Oregon, Western Oregon. But I just didn't think it would be so widespread in the 1700s in North Carolina. So I looked it up, and it hadn't even reached the state at that particular time. I also wondered why don't we ever see an outhouse on the property? Have we seen an outhouse on the property?
Or
And
the
where
cairn.
does Ian live? I want to know
Where
where
does
Ian
live?
lives.
Where is Murtaugh buried? And where do they
Yes,
go to
And
the
that's
where
the
is
other
bathroom?
the damn privy?
Yeah,
that
where did they
Jamie
go to
was
the
building in
bathroom?
front of
Yep.
the house in season
He digs
5.
them all the time. He's dug
Exactly.
several.
Maybe it's on the side of the house they rarely show. Because
Yeah.
Could be.
if you're facing the house, they rarely show the back right.
Well, maybe
Yep.
it's an indoor privy. I don't know. It probably
But they
have one
Called a
of
still don't
chamber
those.
show
pot.
the cairn though. We still can't figure out where Murtaugh's buried because that's just
No,
moved
well, we
and
knew
it's gone
once,
now.
and it keeps moving.
Listen,
a
no,
ghost
what
cairn.
has
It's gone.
happened
It's
is the
Murtaugh's
stable has
history.
been built over Murtaugh's cairn.
That's what I
That's
think.
why the cairn has disappeared, because
Yeah.
they built the stables over it. So Murtaugh's cairn is nestling in the big fancy stables.
Oh,
Lizzie
it could
and
be.
That solves that.
Kezzy and Joe are getting freaky on top of Murtaugh.
Exactly
That's
so.
right. It's the altar
Because
of Murtaugh.
They're always lurking in that bloody state.
So
Yeah,
where do
they're
you
not-
guys
Is that
think
what they
Ian
call
lives?
it now? I don't
Where do you
it's
think
called
Ian
lurking.
lives?
I don't
Somewhere
know.
far. That's a good question, because
Yeah.
What?
when
Where
he
does Ian
first
live?
came back, they had offered him a room in the house, but then he
Yeah.
said he felt better outside.
Yes.
But then in season 5, he seemed to be in the house.
Didn't he build a cabin at some point?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
he
maybe-
does.
Oh,
Ben,
well, maybe
yes.
he's in Marcelly and Fergus's cabin now that they have gone.
Maybe he's down there in that shack that
The love
Murtaugh
shack.
made
Sin
love
eater?
to.
Oh,
No.
No, the love shack. from
The Love
501.
Shack. yes.
It was
Wrong.
with Myrtle
Poor
and
Murtaugh
Jocasta.
made love to Jocasta's thigh, right
Yeah,
thigh.
the Love Shack.
Love Shack, baby. Oh Lord.
So I asked John Gary Steele, you guys might have seen on Twitter, if the interiors are part of the location or if they are at the studio in Cumbernauld. And they are indeed at the studio, not on location, which I found interesting.
Does that include her surgery? Did you think
He-
that included her
He
surgery?
said, yes, all the interiors are at stage, though a bit of hall and Claire's surgery is built on location, so actors can be shot walking into the spaces. So I think her surgery when they're acting in there is the studio,
Mhm.
but maybe we see parts of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure about that, so I found that really interesting. Kat said on their Instagram live today that that was not she in the opening scene, and probably not Sophie either. That was her body double, Valeriha Hmeldanenko.
Which opening scene? Which
The
part?
title cards where they're at the
Oh,
diner.
where they're at the diner.
Oh,
which-
oh.
I don't know about you guys, but when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to go to the future.
Yeah.
And
that's
then
what
I kept
thought
waiting for Brie and Roger to accidentally go through some
too.
thing. And then it
Oh.
wasn't until the second watch, I was like, oh no, that's her favorite
Yeah,
meal.
that's what they
That's
were getting.
Carmi's place that she talks about. That's the second time they've mentioned that. I've never heard of that diner before.
Meryl said in a tweet that Carmi's Diner is a nod to one of our original stars execs. So I don't know if that's
Oh,
like Chris Parnell or Chris Albrecht, maybe.
was it a real place?
It must be.
Must be, yeah.
Meryl also said the interior of the prison is built on our sets, and it's such a realistic, amazing set. Shout out to Mike Gunn and his team. And she said, I may or may not have been standing on that set recently for filming of season 7. Let's
Which
see.
means she was, or she wouldn't mention it.
Exactly. Did you guys see the little video with Sam and Chris Larkin?
Yeah,
I heard about it.
yeah.
Yeah, where
When
they're
they were
talking to each
about
other.
they just stand around and stare at each other.
Yeah. So when I first saw their scene together, all I could think of was squinty, squinty, because that's what he said.
There's a
He
lot of
stand around
squinty,
and do a
squinty
little
going on.
squinty, squinty. Yeah. Meryl said one of the coolest things about working on Outlander is getting to see all the amazing props generated from our props department. Like all the rooms we saw this season. Yeah, they probably saw more.
Well, maybe it's the
Okay.
shooting of the room, like how they were
Okay, so
shooting
they
out
have
the
so they
room.
have like crop
Vrooms,
zooms
vrooms.
and extra zooms.
Rooms.
Vrooms, the
Vrooms.
The little
cars,
toy
that Roger.
cars and the
Yeah, I
toy
thought we only saw
plane.
one.
Yeah, that's what I
No.
thought too.
No, there was an earlier one.
Oh, the
I
whole
can't remember which
season.
episode. Yeah. through
Oh,
the
Yeah.
I thought
season.
you were saying in this episode it's just the one.
Maybe they have extra zooms. if
I
one
had
gets
a
broken
little
or something.
DM with Therese Bradley,
Mhm.
and she said, "You lassies have made this job an absolute pleasure." Isn't that sweet?
That
Yeah.
is lovely.
You are truly the most committed lovers of the story. I have loved Outlander from the get-go and am friends with Stephen Cree and acquainted with Grant O'Rourke. They have often said Outlander fans are extraordinary. However, it has been such a joy to have been recognized for such a tiny role. I make a commitment as an actress to play characters as authentically as possible, not to make the unpalpable palpable, to not fear being disliked, especially when we all know these human beings exist today and create division and chaos in the world.
I like her.
Yeah, me too.
She's
Now,
she's
which
become
one
my
is
little
she? She's
Twitter
played the
bestie.
Miss
She-
McGregor, the
McGregor.
terrible
Yes.
one.
The
Yeah,
terrible
colonial
one, yeah.
Karen.
The
Colonial Karen. That's the best. The colonial Karen.
Yes, it was one of our the people that want us on Twitter that came up with that. Elizabeth
great.
somebody.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, that was
Oh,
me.
that's
No,
a
that was
great.
somebody came up.
Good
came
job,
up with it.
Elizabeth.
And
Yep.
then
Shout
Sarah's-
out.
Yeah. Favorite lines.
Oh God, I've got so many.
I have quite a few, but when Ian said, I am not alone, it was just kind of snuck in there.
Mhm.
When Jamie's peeing and he says, he looks up and says, Christ, and Ian says, they have a little conversation. Ian says, no, more like a guardian angel. And then they're chatting back and forth. And Ian said, I am not alone to him.
What's that?
And it's pretty cool. I went back and listened twice to make sure that I had heard what I had heard, but that line comes from Ian, even though it has applicability throughout, in my opinion, throughout the episode. Still, it was Ian that spoke the line.
You horse stealing scotcher.
That's a good one.
It's gonna sound like a really strange line, but when Claire Claire says, "Do you really think they'll do that?" When he's talking about burning out, he goes, "That's what I would do in that situation." I was like, "Yeah, that's what I would do."
He's a
I'm like,
bloodthirsty
what a
barbarian.
terrible
that
thing to
one.
tell someone who's already told you she's scared. That was
Too
such a
straight.
classic Jamie thing to say. Just matter of factly, well, that's what I would do. So,
Yep. Yep.
I liked it when Claire said, crab at my ass.
Yes, I
You
like
know,
that
he
too.
says you're crab at, she said, crab at my ass. Then she said, well, maybe I'm a little crabby.
Yeah.
But I just thought that
Those
was
are
a
good.
great line.
Yeah.
And I'm really pleased to see that because they have quite a sense of humor with each other in the books. And we don't always get to see that brought out. And this is one example when even under the most duress
Mhm.
and distressing situation, they're able to find some humor in that.
Mhm.
And old Tom is eavesdropping too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was.
Peeping Tom. Well, listening Tom.
What was the point of the scene with the mice eating the food? Whose food was
You
that?
mean in the jail?
No,
Oh.
it was when they were in the wagon situation,
wagon.
right? Wasn't it?
Yeah, was
I
that
mean, there
supposed
was
to be the
there
food
was a
that
rat
Tom
in the
left,
jail, but
or
this was,
yeah,
it didn't
I didn't
show.
understand that. That one scene, I was like, what?
I didn't see that. Mice eating food.
A mouse
Yeah,
was
in
was
the
at a plate of food.
yeah,
I never thought that hearing a litany of your near-death experiences would bring me so much peace. Or maybe it's just the
The
nearness of
nearness
you.
of you.
That was a very
Lovely.
sweet scene, and that could have been cheesy.
Yeah.
mhm.
But
it
it was-
wasn't
It wasn't. No, it was sweet.
perfect. Yep.
When Jimmy put his ear next to Brie's tummy and said, "Hi, baby, I love you a lot." I thought that was very sweet. And, you know, he's a little kid, but I thought he said that really sweetly. I liked that line.
Yeah, he did. I
Yeah,
like
that
to
was cute.
clean up on aisle 5.
Oh.
Let's run through our standouts.
Well, I put Sam and Cat in a category by themselves because I just think they carried the day in this whole episode. They were Jamie and Claire to the teeth, as far as they were armed to the teeth for a while, and then they were playing them to the teeth. I just thought they were wonderful in in their parts, and you know, they worked so well together. They just remind me of a well-oiled machine. They mesh, you know, and it's, for me, they're believable in the parts that they're playing. And yes, they are very unusual people for their time, very exceptional people, and yet they just, I don't know, for me, they're very believable. I've invested so much of my life in those two characters, to be truthful. And they bring them to life for me. So I think they're both standouts.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the acting definitely was the standout for me in this episode. the triumvirate of Jamie, Claire, and Tom Christie. Powerful, extremely powerful. And all of them brought it, and all of them were just inhabiting their roles. So for me, the acting in this episode was really what did it for me.
Mark Lewis Jones. I feel so enriched that I've gotten to see his work.
Mhm.
I want to mention also Chris Larkin,
Oh God, yes.
Sam and Cat, but John Bell too
Mhm.
was great. He didn't do a lot in this episode, but as you say, Carmen, he owns that character.
Yeah, I want a nephew like him. I
Yes.
want an Ian in my life.
Yes.
Oh, I haven't.
And Sam and Cat, obviously, but they've just become, you just expect it. It's
Yeah.
just I mean, they just are the anchors, and they show up. If the writing is there, they're there.
Yeah.
And the writing was there. Luke Skelhaus, I want to call him out because, you know, I've complained in the past, and I think his first episode was Heaven and Earth, wasn't it? In
Wasn't
season
it when
3?
wasn't it the slap?
That
Or
was in
was it
season 4.
4?
But he wrote in season 3 also.
Heaven
I
and Earth.
believe.
That
I
was not a
believe so.
memorable episode to me.
Is the one with Elias, right?
Mhm.
Elias Pound. Anyway,
Oh, that was pretty good actually.
I think he
at
did that
least.
one. But
Mm.
man, I definitely think he's read the books, and now he's one of my favorite writers, and I just
Yeah.
really appreciate him.
Yep.
And I'll just shout out to Therese, Colonial Karen, for the small part. She's memorable, and
Yeah.
Exactly.
yeah, those are my standouts. And the music. This episode,
Oh,
for some
God.
reason, is the music was even more stellar in this episode.
I agree.
I agree.
What standouts for me was Mark Lewis Jones. I was watching to see his next scene, waiting for his next scene.
Yeah.
And that, you know, he was so good. It almost made me impatient watching scenes he wasn't in, because I just enjoyed his acting so much. And the nuance of, and not even just in this episode, but throughout the whole season, and how, you know, his piety just sort of chipped away, and then he became soft, and, you know, it got to the point where I actually kind of liked him, you know, and even though he was looking tired and a little bit ragged, he was actually got attractive towards the end of the season. I was like, who knew?
When people are kind and
Yeah.
when they begin to behave more decently, they are more attractive, I think.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
True.
exactly.
And
True.
he's doing that. And so you know, I mean, think of Larkin. If he were a different character, he might be far more attractive, but under these
Mhm.
circumstances, he's repugnant
Mm-mm.
Very
to
much
me.
so.
And I figured out what it is he does with his mouth. But he does this weird thing. He goes,
Yeah, he
he
pulls it
sucks in
under
his
his
bottom
jaw.
lip, and it's like, where do your teeth go? Where does your jaw go when you do that?
It looks like he's pulling his jaw back.
He doesn't do that as a person. That's this
As
character.
part of his
That is a
character.
okay.
Yeah,
So if it's something he does as a character, it's brilliant.
It's
It
If it's
brilliant.
something he does in
absolutely
real
is.
life, it would be weird as hell.
so in the interview, the little just blurb with him and
Mhm.
Sam, what struck me is he's got a very English accent, number one,
Mhm.
and he doesn't have that mouth thing going on, number 2.
Yeah.
So that's totally for his character.
That's Brown, huh?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good.
Yeah, that's his brown character.
So I
Well,
just
then
want to
he's-
mention
he's-
Jamie Payne in the standouts, because he directed the last 2 episodes, and
Okay.
clearly he's phenomenal.
Very much so.
Okay, big themes. Carmi.
Oh boy.
Hmm.
The big theme to me in this episode is Jamie and Claire. They are the living examples of the marriage vow that they made to each other.
Mm.
You are bone of my blood, and bone of my bone. I give you my body that we two may be one. I give you my spirit till our life on earth is done, or whatever the last line is. And I think the way that they worked together, the way they stuck together, the way that they thought together, the way that they loved together, the way they responded together is all an example of that commitment that they made to each other many, many years ago. And it's been pretty unwavering. It's, yes,
Mhm.
it's had its ups and downs, but it's the core of this story. And it may be Jamie's story told from Claire's eyes, but it is their love story that is the core of it, in my opinion. You think of the metaphor of the rock standing against the waves, and the waves strike the rock over and over and over again, but it stands steady. And that's how I see their commitment to each other.
Mm.
And,
That's cool.
and we're seeing that in this season.
Yes,
That's right. Which is what we have been clamoring for.
yes.
Long
And
may
they
it continue.
delivered. Guess what? They delivered.
They delivered.
Long may it continue. For however long Outlander continues, long may this eye that they have brought with Jamie and Claire as the center continue.
And you know, I
mm.
quoted a fan earlier on some earlier discussion. It was Diane Manning again, and she said, Jamie and Claire were still the sun and the moon, and the other characters orbit, but they're becoming constellations in themselves.
Mhm.
I thought that was beautifully said.
Yeah, I agree.
I was looking at the episode. I watched it again today, this morning before I started work. And I was thinking about the whole being accused of a crime. And I mean, and you know that you didn't do it. How do you prove your innocence? How? And it just brought home to me how difficult it is, even in these modern times, for people who are accused of crimes to navigate their way out of a criminal justice system that once it has you in its vice grip, it is very, very difficult to extricate yourself, even if you're innocent. Because our system is supposed to be built on, it is better that the guilty go free than one innocent person is convicted. But unfortunately, that is not the way that it works out, because there are lots of innocent people who are convicted every single day in this country. Lots of innocent people. And that is exactly the fate that was awaiting Claire. She didn't do it. She's innocent, but she was going to be found guilty and condemned. So I came away with a question rather than a big theme. How does a person go through something like that, being accused of a horrible crime, knowing that they're innocent, but unable to prove it?
That's sad.
Very much so. Heartbreaking.
My big theme, I think, is a little lighter this
Hopefully.
episode. You know, Carmen, I think you mentioned at some prior season, I don't remember which one, that anti-heroes are the big thing right now in TV. And I'm hoping that maybe it's changing and maybe Outlander is leading the way.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, but we got heroes in this episode. Jamie's a hero, Claire's a hero, Ian's a hero, Tom's a hero.
Mhm.
And it's so
Bird who
wonderful.
sings in the
Bird.
morning is a hero.
Bird who I
Bird.
forgot about Bird. Bird who sings in the morning is a hero.
Yep.
And it's not a problem. I'm not sure what the problem was, but it's, to me, it's wonderful to have that back, to experience that joy, to have those moments when you say, "Yay, there he is." You know, it doesn't have to, you know, and I have a whole other thought that's, we'll talk about at some point, around why Jamie was not allowed to be a hero in the beginning. But
This is one of the reasons why I love the ending so much.
Mhm.
yeah, because it's heroic.
Yes.
So my big theme is, we can all be heroes. It's, heroes are among us like angels. People can be heroes. It's okay. We can do it. And I love
It's allowed.
seeing, yeah, and I love seeing it in this episode. You know, whether it's, I don't watch that much TV, so I don't know if the anti-hero thing is still going on, but I just applaud them for going there, because I
Well,
remember,
all of the Marvel characters now are terribly flawed, it seems like. So I think it's still
Basically.
going on.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, Tom's clearly a flawed hero, but we got to see his transformation, and he showed up for the woman he loves, and for what's fair and righteous. And I just, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And I just want to see more of that pervade, like, just elevate, because
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be cheesy. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be shallow. It doesn't have to be trite. It's,
Mhm.
And they don't
Um,
have to be perfect either to be a hero.
they're more interesting when they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my big theme, is heroism. And yeah, heck yeah.
Yay.
I like that.
My overall theme was that was a couple, but mainly is that Outlander, especially in this episode, has a way of taking really, really heavy episodes and still throwing lightness in there that doesn't come off as being comedic or trite. And you know, like Claire shoots the guy, "You shot me." It was kind of funny. It was a kind of a funny-ish moment. Or when Jamie says, "Well, that's what I would do," you know, that seemed like somewhat a funny-ish moment. And I remember thinking at the end, when the guy got shot through the hand and then it went into his eye, I was like, well, that takes hand-eye coordination to another level. But you know, but I was just like, it was like, you know, it was like why did they do that? They could have just killed him shot him in the chest, but it's like, no, we had to do something funny, like go through his hand.
I thought it was cool.
I did too.
You know, it's like, but it was like those little things, you know, that are just and the other is that I love the way history always seems to repeat itself, but true art, the way they do it is such true art that it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel repetitious, because we could have easily compared this to when Claire was taken by Blackjack Randall, and then Jamie had to go after her, or you know, and you just thought she's doomed, you know, there's no way. And so or being surrounded and just being in a situation where you're surrounded by guns and you just like, what are you going to do? Claude's another example of when that happened. And so I just thought artistic. That was what I came away with. It's just, this is extremely artistic. It's not just television, it's art.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I want to say
That
something.
is why it evokes all of these responses in us. That's what good art is supposed to provoke.
It's supposed to do
in
that.
us. Yeah.
Yes.
And it does.
Yeah.
Sorry, Carmen, go ahead.
I was going to say, you were talking about the hand-eye coordination. And when I saw him go like that, it reminded me of Talk to the Hand, you know, that was so popular a couple of years ago. And, yeah,
Like,
I'll talk to it.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, talk to the hand. you know, he farfled when he did that. He fucked around and found out.
Yes, and that
Right.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a satisfying moment.
Yeah, that
It
was
really
Told
was.
you
extremely
I'd fight for
satisfying.
you, Bear Killer.
And that
Yeah.
that all, you know, them lined up along the ridge.
The
you
top of
know.
the,
And they've used that kind of scenes more than once in Outlander, where they've kind of been on their horses up
Mhm.
high along a ridge.
Well, that's
and
a
that-
classic.
It is.
for-
Yeah, it's a
and it's
classic
really
scene in
just,
Westerns.
Yeah,
it gives you
exactly.
that same the you know, the goosebumps every time you see it, because you're like, ooh,
Mhm.
it's so
Yeah.
cool.
You're dead now, you assholes.
You know, and it's just,
Exactly.
You guys
and I
think-
just love John Bell in that.
Oh, Jesus.
So
I
good.
do
And
too.
the
He's
thing
so
is,
good.
he's like this little
We-
macho guy, and it's like, but in real, he isn't at all in real life. It's
No,
like
but he
moves-
doesn't. When he
yeah.
steps into Ian, he is Ian,
I
in my
know,
opinion.
yeah,
It's
you
it's an
know?
amazing transformation.
It really is,
Yeah.
and it's just like, you know,
And
sorry,
he had some
ladies.
cool lines in this episode.
You
when
did.
Jamie says, when Jamie says, don't shoot it, you know, it's very clear in there. Well, so do we, Uncle. Blam.
Yeah,
That, as you said, Courtney, very satisfying.
yeah.
Yeah, very. Do you think Blue Suit made it to the ship?
No,
Yeah, it wasn't a part. It wasn't.
I thought when
No.
he was taken out there with all those clothes on, you know, and those shoes and the heavy coat, I thought you're not going to get very far, man.
He's a goner. He's a goner.
You,
Well, there was
I
a
took
little
it that
boat
he
out
was the
there, so maybe
captain.
they rode towards him and helped
It
him
could
out.
be.
I think
They better
came and
row
picked him up.
fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Anyway.
Well, ladies,
Yes.
Oh,
Good
my God.
we did it.
We're through. We
Yeah.
did it. Good job.
Yep.
It's
Lovely
past
to
half
see all
10.
of you.
Yeah. Bye.
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 Love
Good
you
night.
guys.
I'm gonna go make a cup of tea and eat some digestive
Biscuits.
Some
biscuits.
biscuits.
I'm going straight
Those
to
look
bed.
like frisbees.
Bye. I'll
They're
see you
big.
all.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.